Hello my dear friends, my name is Sanne and I'm back with another beauty video. And today we're gonna take a deep dive into my makeup collection and we're gonna be comparing some of my eyeshadow palettes. Why? Because I want to be honest. I don't have that many eyeshadow palettes in my opinion, and almost every single eyeshadow palette in my collection has its own color scheme and is kind of unique to my collection. I just have a few palettes that are kind of overlapping a tiny bit. Most of them are neutrals palettes, of course, because neutrals are a bit more common, so they tend to overlap a bit more. But there is also a trend in my eyeshadow palettes of mint colored or mint based eyeshadow palettes. It's just because I really like mint eyeshadow. Mint is in general one of my favorite colors. You can't really see it right now, but my room is decorated with white furniture with mint detailing, so almost every single thing in my room that is smaller is mint colored. I also really like to wear mint eyeshadow, especially in springtime, so I currently have 3 eyeshadow palettes that are based around the color mint. And I just felt like we're going into springtime, it's the perfect time to bust out your mint eyeshadows. So why not compare my palettes and see if they are a bit similar, if I can get rid of one, what's the quality difference between them, which one would I recommend and which one wouldn't I, you know, that kind of thing. So I'm just kind of quickly showing and reviewing for you 3 of my palettes, and we're just gonna see if there's a lot of overlapping colors or not. So let's quickly get into it. So the palettes that I'm gonna be talking about today are the e.l.f. Mint Melt palette in the shade Mint to Be, the FAB Factory Mint Crush palette, which is a very affordable dupe of the Huda Beauty Pastel Mint palette, and of course the Colourpop the Child palette. As you can probably tell, only one of these palettes is actually completely fully mint colored, which is the e.l.f. Mint to Be palette. That is also because it's a 4-pan little palette. It's a little quad. Of course, it's easier to create 4 different mint shades, and for the 9-pan palettes it's a bit more difficult and they add in a few neutral shades. Of course, the Baby Yoda palette isn't really meant to be a mint based palette. It just happens to have a good mint shade in it, and it's one of my favorite mint shades to use, so that's why I included it in this one, because of course the color story in this palette is based on Baby Yoda and the Mandalorian series. So there's some greens in there, a few mint shades because Baby Yoda is kind of mint, and then some neutrals. And then the FAB Factory palette, I don't know if you could tell from what I just showed you, but there isn't really an actual mint shade in here. It's the Mint Crush palette, but the matte mint, this one that's in here, it's that's not mint, that's teal. That's definitely not mint. If it were the same shade as the packaging, it would have been mint, but no, that's not mint. The shade next to it is mint, but that's satin. We don't really have a mint matte. So I think it would be fun to swatch some of the shades, but kind of swatch the similar shades together. So I think I'm gonna start with the e.l.f. one as a base, and then swatch the similar shades of the different palettes next to that one, so we can see what the overlap between this completely mint palette and the other palettes is. Let me just bare my arm here for you so we can get started. I always do all my swatches on dry arm with dry fingies. We're not going to be using any primers or anything, so just so you know that. So I'm just going to swatch out these shades for you, and then we can swatch the other shades next to it. This minty shimmer shade is a bit too bad. It's absolutely freaking beautiful, but it gets hard to pan really easily. But it's really nice. Okay, the mint swatches very well on your finger, but when you apply it to your skin over here, it barely shows up. This one definitely needs tacky facing. Maybe it's also just because I'm pale as hell, and especially underneath my arms right here. And then the final shade is the dark shade. I don't think these shades have names, these quad shades. Beautiful. And that's really a cool toned green gray shade kind of vibe, which I think is gonna be real interesting comparing it to the other palettes, because the other palettes are definitely more warm toned. And this little quad, the e.l.f. quad, is a cool toned little quad, so I do think the other palettes are gonna be a bit different. But this is the base we're working with. These are the shades. So I'm gonna start with the Baby Yoda palette. I feel like this row is definitely what we're gonna have to get into. So I'm gonna go into Babyface, which is my favorite little matte mint in my collection. And this is a bit of a deeper shade than this shade, I'm pretty sure. Which sides should we put it on? I'm gonna put it right here next to it. See that? And when you look at it like this, these two next to each other, Babyface is so green. Like it basically looks green next to the minty shade from the e.l.f. palette. Like if you would see these next to each other, you would pick out that one as green. That I wouldn't pick it out as mint, but on its own in this palette, that's definitely mint. And I've created some really like mint eyeshadows with that, so that's really interesting. And then I'm of course gonna get into this one, and this one is definitely gonna be a lot greener than the deep matte from the e.l.f. palette, because this palette is a lot more warm toned. So I'm gonna put that one right here. And you can also immediately tell that that's a lot more like army greenish. Well, that's really interesting. I thought that the mint shade from the Baby Yoda palette was gonna be like darker, but a bit closer to like tint wise. Because shade wise it looks so different. Like shade wise that's just an entirely different shade of green. And I think I'm gonna swatch this one next to the green shimmer. But this is gonna be so different because this is just a golden green. And this is a cool tone mint, so that's just gonna be like an entirely different shade. I'm also gonna swatch this shimmer, Right Hand Mando, but that's basically like a golden tone. But as you can tell from these swatches already, the Baby Yoda palette is just a lot more green and a lot more golden toned. And the e.l.f. palette is just, that's basically the real mint. But of course the Baby Yoda palette was never meant to be a mint palette. Looks a bit like it because the packaging is mint. But that's because Baby Yoda is mint, and there are a lot of other shades in Baby Yoda as well. So it didn't really mean to be a mint palette, but I do think like when I use this one, like I created a look with the mint shade and the cool toned shimmers from the Mandalorian palette in my Mandalorian review. And that look was like really, really, really minty. It's a bit deeper than what I create with my e.l.f. palette, but it's really, really minty. I don't know, I just felt like the mint shade would be a lot more mint instead of green when you compare it like this. It's really interesting. And now the struggle is gonna be to get similar shades out of this palette, because this palette, as you can see, only has 2 mint-y shades. So I don't think we're gonna be able to get more than 2 out of there. So I'm first gonna go into this matte shade, of course. And I'm gonna be swatching that right here. And as you can see, that is a teal. That is a teal. If I've ever seen one, that is not mint at all. It's a pretty color, like I'm not denying that. It's a really nice color. For the fact that this palette was €2, it's also great pigmentation. But gosh, that is not a mint shade at all. That really jumps out, doesn't it? Oh, then this shade, I think, can be a bit similar to the shimmer in the e.l.f. palette, this one. So I'm gonna be putting it right here. Yeah, that's interesting. Like that is approximately the same shade. Same base shade, like if you see it right here in the shadow, it's the same base shade, just the e.l.f. one, of course, it's very shimmery. e.l.f. shimmers are gorgeous. But this one is more of a satin, so it functions more as a matte than it does as a shimmer, so that's interesting. But I do feel like you can do a fun look with those 2 shades together. Those will match really well together. And then I'm just gonna go into this bluish one, because I don't know how that will swatch, but we'll swatch that one next to here. It's a weird shade, okay. That does not match anything at all. And there really is no deeper mint-y shade in this palette, so we're not even gonna try. But yeah, these are the mint shades from all the palettes. As you can see, they are very different. Like literally only these 2 are similar in color. The rest has just such different tones and base colors and everything. They're just really, really different palettes. And it's really interesting to me how different the mint in the Baby Yoda palette is from the mint in the e.l.f. palette. But that's just also my, you know, terrible calculation probably. These two also both have a few brown shades in them. So I kind of just want to compare those brown shades as well, just to see what's the difference between those two palettes. So I'm gonna go into this deep brown first, from the FAB Factory palette. Which feels really soft, by the way. Kind of forgot I haven't really used this palette in a while. Okay, and of course I'm comparing that to this one in the Baby Yoda palette, which then feels a lot drier, but of course dry doesn't really necessarily mean anything bad, but those are very similar. But I would say that the Baby Yoda one is a bit more warm toned compared to the other one. And that makes sense because the entire Baby Yoda palette is a lot more warm toned. And now I'm gonna go into this shade. These shades in this palette also don't have any names, so I'm just, you know, pointing what I'm using. And then going into Just Like a Tatooine from the Baby Yoda palette. Which is a lot more pigmented straight away. But as you can see, those shades are very similar, but they're just more warm toned in the Child palette. Also, look how gross my hand is now. And that's kind of all the comparable shades we have in these palettes, because the shimmers in this one are definitely cool toned. I can try to do this one next to that e.l.f. one, just for funsies. Oh wait, I forgot how terrible that one is. Ooh, never mind. Like literally it just doesn't show up. Can you see? Like nothing happens. Oh, I forgot how terrible that shade was, I'm sorry. No, we can't compare that to anything. But yeah, these are all the comparable shades. The brown shimmers in the Baby Yoda palette are very golden, very warm toned, extremely warm toned. And all the brown shimmers in the FAB Factory palette are very cool toned, so I can't, like, they are just generally very different shades. I'm not gonna be comparing those. So these are like all the comparable shades, and as you can see, like, there's not a single shade that's the same. Only these two, but this one is a satin and this one is a bright shimmer, and that's it. And of course, like, these brown shades are very comparable, just the undertone is a tiny bit different. And if I had to choose, I would definitely prefer to use the Colourpop Baby Yoda palette. The pigmentation is just a lot better. It's a lot more easy to use than the FAB Factory palette. So if I had to compare these two, I would definitely go for the Colourpop palette. And then, like, I don't know, if you look at this, you can't really say that this is a real true mint palette, because this is the only true mint palette if you compare these three. So this one would win if you're just going off mint shades, but if you're going on just how nice the shades are and how well I can use them, I would probably go for this one. So that's just personal preference and, you know, what criteria you're basing this on. I'm just quickly gonna wash this all off so we can do like a comparable makeup look between these two, because I feel like this one is just definitely out of the question with only one shade being similar to the e.l.f. one. Or maybe I can combine these two to go against this one, but we'll figure that out when I start the makeup look. I'm just quickly gonna get ready, take this off, and then we'll get into the makeup looks. I did do my entire base makeup already before the video, and I have primed my eyes using an eyeshadow primer, so we're working with a bit of a different base than during the swatches. And I think I'm just gonna go in with the fluffy brush, and first off the e.l.f. palette, which will be on this side, I think. And I'm gonna go into the light matte mint shade. And this shade is so light, so it does take a little while to build up, but it does work pretty well on a tacky base, as you can see. We're just blending that into the crease. We're gonna do a very simple look just to see the difference of these shades on the eyes. And I'm just gonna be dragging that down my under eye as well for a second. So then I'm gonna go into the Baby Yoda palette, into Baby Face, the mint shade. And, you know, this is gonna be deeper, because that's what I knew, that it was gonna be deeper, but I couldn't really have guessed that it was a lot more green toned instead of blue toned. But we're just gonna be applying it in the same way. You can immediately see that this one is a lot deeper, but I feel like on the eyes, it isn't really that great of a difference in tones. Like you can tell this is a bit more green, but it's not as great of a difference as it seemed in the swatches. Okay, so that's already a difference. So now we're gonna get into deeper shades. So of course I'm going in on the e.l.f. side with this one and just apply that in the outer corner a tiny bit. Just deepen up that outer corner. That's all I want to do. I want to blend this side out a bit with that lighter shade because the deeper shade does cover it up quite a bit. But kind of like having these two on top of each other, you're getting closer to this one. And then of course on the Baby Yoda side we're going in with Float Your Crib, which is definitely a lot more green toned. Apparently deep mints are struggling a bit with applying properly on top of other shades. And as you can see, I've deepened up that corner a bit and now it's looking really different, like two entirely different shades. This really pulled out that green undertone. And then on the e.l.f. side I'm going in with this green shade and I'm just gonna be using my finger, but we're just gonna be applying that kind of to the center of the lid. And I think for the other side we're gonna switch it up a bit. And we're going into that FAB Factory one because this is kind of the only shade that was actually very similar. So I do want to get into this one. Even though this is more of a satin and not really a shimmer. Just so we're getting a similar shade on that eyelid. And then for this side we're finally gonna go into the lighter shade, which is probably my favorite shade in this palette. And of course just applying that to... Ooh. Ooh, there's so much falling past my nose, I could feel it. I'm gonna apply it to the inner corner of the lid. So this is kind of like the basic look I usually pull out when I work with the e.l.f. quad, which is really pretty, but man, it's already so different from this one. And on this side, I guess we're going in with this shimmer, which is definitely gold, so this is gonna look a whole lot different. Okay, so now we've used the most comparable shades in the palettes. And as you can see, they're two very different looks. They're both like very cute. Mint shades are just really adorable. I love mint shades. I do feel like this side, even though it's lighter, it clashes a bit more with my skin tone because it's very cool toned and therefore stands out a bit more. And this one, because it's more warm toned, it blends more into my skin and therefore looks more natural. But both sides are very, very pretty in themselves, like, but they're not comparable at all. Which is a good thing to me because that means I don't really have any or a lot of duplicates in my collection, so that's good. So this is the result of comparing 3 mint palettes. As you can see, they can't really be compared. There are just barely any overlapping colors, barely any dupes in between them, and both sides are like such a different vibe in look. That's my opinion at least. So I'm glad because it means that all these 3 palettes are adding something to my collection, so that's nice. But we talked about the e.l.f. bite-sized mint melt palette in the shade Mint to Be. The FAB Factory Mint Crush palette, I don't know if this one is available anymore, but don't be afraid, you're not really missing out on much. If it were up to me, it would only be between these 2 palettes and then you have this one. I might declutter this one someday because I don't really use it that often at all, especially when I have these 2. Which are just way better mint palettes. There are more mint shades in these. And then of course we talked about the Colourpop the Child palette. And if I have to choose between these 2, in general as palettes, I would pick this one just because it has a lot of versatility, it has some neutrals in there. The mints are absolutely beautiful and I love the warm tones of it. It really looks lovely with my skin tone. So personally that, but also this one is just so much fun if you really want to go for that mint look. Like if you just want mint shades, then I would opt for this one. If you're doing it for the mint shades, I wouldn't necessarily get this one. I would just get this one. It's a lot more affordable. You have all the mint shades you may need and you can get that mint look. With this one you can get a mint look but also some extra things, so it just depends on what you're looking for. I hope you enjoyed this like comparison thing, and if it helped, I don't know, maybe let me know. Let me know if you have like anything else that you want me to compare. I can check if I have any of the palettes or if I can compare it with something else or if I can get swatches from any of my friends or whatever. Do let me know if you need anything to be compared. And that's gonna be it for me today. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel if you want to see more from me. If you want to see even more from me, my blog, my socials, my Instagram where I share all my makeup looks, and my gaming channel are all linked down below, so you can check that out as well. And that's gonna be it for me today. I wanna thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Toodles!